The altar smelled of pine resin and wolf blood. Sacred oils burned in iron bowls around the stone platform. Torchlight flickered across 1,000 upturned faces. Warriors, elders, pups, and pack mothers. All gathered beneath the open sky to witness what was meant to be the most sacred ritual in our world. A mating ceremony. My mating ceremony. I remember standing at the base of the altar steps in a ceremonial dress sewn from pale wolf linen. Thin straps over my bare shoulders, silver thread stitched along the hem. The kind of dress you wore once in your life. The kind of dress that meant something. My hands were steady. I don't know why I remember that my hands were steady. Because everything else inside me was shaking. I had known Kale Donfong since I was 12 years old. He had been 18 then, already built like something carved from ancient stone, already wearing authority like a second skin. I had been a servant girl in his father's hall. Nobody's daughter, nobody's wolf, just a small Omega who kept the hearth fires burning and stayed out of the way. He had never looked at me. Not once. Until the moon goddess decided to make a mockery of us both and bond our souls together with a pull so undeniable it dropped me to my knees the first time he walked past me in his father's courtyard. A fated mate bond. The most sacred force in our world. And he had felt it too. I saw it. The way he stopped mid-stride, the way his head turned slowly toward me, nostrils flaring, silver eyes suddenly sharp and confused in equal measure. For 3 heartbeats, neither of us moved. Then he walked away. He didn't speak to me for 6 months after that. But pack law is pack law, and the bond is the bond, and eventually, the elders intervened. Kale was the alpha heir of Ironmore Pack, the most powerful of the 5 packs in our region. He was expected to take a Luna. The bond had chosen. The ceremony was arranged. I climbed the altar steps with steady hands and a heart full of something I was too proud to call hope. He climbed them from the other side. And for one moment, just one, our eyes met across the sacred flame, and I thought, maybe. Then the High Elder raised the binding cord, and Kale looked out at the crowd. And he said the words I have never forgotten. I refuse this bond. The silence that fell was absolute. 1,000 wolves, not a single breath. The High Elder's hands trembled. Alpha Kale, the ceremony has. I refuse. His voice was a blade, clean and cold. An Omega servant cannot lead beside an Alpha of my standing. The bond is a mistake. I will take a chosen Luna, one of pure blood and proper lineage, and the moon goddess will understand. He didn't look at me when he said it. Not once. I stood at the altar in my white dress while 1,000 faces turned toward me, and I felt the exact moment the bond, that golden thread the moon goddess had woven between us, snapped. It didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like dying. But I didn't fall. My hands were steady, and I made myself a promise, standing on that altar, in front of every wolf who would ever doubt me. I will make you look at me. I will make you all look. 3 years have passed since that night. A great deal has changed. 3 years before the altar. Let me tell you what it meant to be an Omega in Ironmore Pack. It meant you woke before the sun did. It meant the calluses on your hands were your only jewelry, and the bruises on your knees from kneeling on stone floors were your only mark of belonging. It meant you ate what was left when the warriors were finished, slept in the servants' hall near the heat of the dying kitchen fire, and learned very early that making yourself invisible was not a weakness. It was survival. My name is Seraphine Ashvale. No one used it. They called me Sarah, when they called me anything at all. I had no pack rank worth speaking of. My mother had been a rogue Omega who died 3 days after birthing me on the edge of Ironmore territory. The pack healer had brought me in out of pity, or perhaps practicality. One more set of hands for the kitchens, one more body to carry firewood in the depths of winter. I was not mistreated. Not exactly. I was simply unseen, and I had made peace with it. I had found ways to fill the invisible hours. The High Elder's library was left unlocked on feast days, and I had memorized the location of every loose stone and shadow in the great hall. I read by firelight when the other servants slept. Ancient pack law. Combat theory, the histories of the 5 packs, the sacred texts of the moon goddess, and the old rites of power. Knowledge no Omega was expected to hold. I held it anyway. It was late autumn, the night the bond found me. I was carrying a basket of firewood through the inner courtyard when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate, the stride of someone who had never needed to make themselves smaller. I turned, and the world cracked open. He was 21 then. Kale Donfong, heir to the Alpha throne of Ironmore, a wolf of such pure bloodline that his silver eyes were known across all 5 packs as a mark of the Donfang lineage's dominance. He wore a dark cloak over battle-worn leather, fresh from a training bout by the look of the sweat at his temples and the controlled energy still running through his frame. He was looking somewhere past me, and then he wasn't. His eyes dropped to mine and everything ignited. I felt it in my chest first. A pull so violent it was almost painful, like something reaching through my ribs and grabbing. My wolf, small and quiet as she had always been, a pale, unimpressive thing by Omega standards, suddenly came fully, roaringly awake. My basket hit the ground. Firewood scattered across the cobblestones. He stopped walking. His nostrils flared. Once, twice. Reading the air the way alphas do, filtering through scent like turning the pages of a book. I watched understanding move through his face. And then something else. Displeasure. He looked at me. Really looked. And I watched him take in the servant's smock, the rough worn hands, the unranked Omega status mark on my wrist. Barely a faint scar where a full pack member's mark would be deeply carved. His jaw tightened, he said nothing. He walked away. I stood in the courtyard surrounded by scattered firewood, trembling from head to heel, and I understood 2 things simultaneously. The moon goddess had chosen him for me, and he was going to fight it. The next months were an education in silence. Kale avoided me with the precision of a strategist. He never spoke, to me directly. If we crossed paths, which I began to realize he arranged to happen as rarely as possible, his gaze moved through me like I was part of the stone wall. But the bond didn't care about his strategy. I felt it every time he was near. A warmth that started behind my sternum and spread outward like firelight. My wolf paced and restless, orienting to him the way a compass orients north. I hated it. I also could not stop it. I threw myself into my reading instead. The High Elder, an ancient wolf named Brennan, had begun to notice me haunting his library. Rather than turning me away, he started leaving specific texts open on the table nearest the window, as if by accident. I was not foolish enough to believe it was. Elder Brennan knew things. He had lived through 6 alpha transitions, 3 pack wars, and the last appearance of a bonded alpha pair in our region 40 years ago. He had sharp eyes inside a weathered face, and he looked at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't name then. Later, I would recognize it as recognition. He saw something in me before I could see it in myself. "You are reading the Rites of Ascension," he said one evening, appearing silently behind me. I nearly knocked the candle over. "Elder, I'm sorry, I left it there for you to read." He lowered himself into the chair across from me with the deliberate care of great age. "What have you learned?" I steadied myself. That alpha authority can be challenged. That the bond between the moon goddess and a wolf is not determined by birth rank. I hesitated. That there are older forms of ascension, before pack rankings, before bloodlines were recorded. He watched me with those sharp old eyes. "And what do you make of that?" I thought of silver eyes looking through me. I thought of a basket of firewood spilled across cold stone. "I make of it," I said carefully, "that power is not always given." He nodded slowly, as if I had passed a test I hadn't known I was taking. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "There is more to read." I came back every day after that. I did not know then that Elder Brennan was building something. I did not know he was building me. The season turned to deep winter before the pack elders formally intervened. I was summoned to the Alpha's Council Hall, a place I had never set foot in, and I walked through its tall iron-banded doors with the careful composure I had spent years constructing, even as my heart hammered. The 5 elders sat in a curved row behind a long stone table. Alpha Aldrich, Kale's father, a massive, white-haired wolf with the same silver eyes but far less coldness in them, sat at the table's head. Kale stood to one side, arms crossed. He did not look at me when I entered. "Seraphine Ashvale," Alpha Aldrich said, and the sound of my full name in this room, spoken with weight, sent something strange through me. "You are known to our pack." "I am a servant, Alpha," I said quietly. "I have served Ironmore since I was brought here as an infant." "You are also," he said, with something careful in his voice, "bonded to my son." The silence that followed was like held breath before thunder. Kale's jaw worked. He said nothing. "The bond cannot be denied under pack law," Elder Brennan said from his position at the end of the row, and now I understood why he had been preparing me. "A mating ceremony must be arranged. The moon goddess has spoken." I kept my eyes level. I kept my hands still, and I watched Kale Donfong across the room close his eyes for one brief second. The only sign of something that might have been conflict, before his face went smooth and cold as winter stone. He had already made his decision. I simply didn't know it yet. The ceremony was scheduled for the blood moon of early spring. I had 3 months. 3 months in which Kale never sought me out, never acknowledged the bond, never gave the smallest sign that the woman the moon goddess had chosen for him was worth acknowledging at all. 3 months in which I read everything Elder Brennan gave me, trained quietly in the pre-dawn hours when the practice grounds were empty, and tried not to let myself want something I was already beginning to understand I was never going to be given. The night before the ceremony, Elder Brennan found me in the library. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said, setting a small, leather-bound book on the table before me, "this is yours." I looked at the book. The cover bore no title, only an embossed mark I didn't recognize. A circle, broken on one side, with a single line cutting through it. "What is it?" I asked. "A map," he said simply. "For what comes after." I didn't understand. I reached for the book. He put his hand briefly over mine, a rare gesture for an elder of his formality, and met my eyes. "You were never meant to be a servant, Seraphine. The moon goddess makes no mistakes. Remember that tomorrow." He left before I could answer. I sat with the book in my hands for a long time. Then I went to sleep. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow everything changes. I was right about that. I was wrong about how. The blood moon rose fat and red over Ironmoor's great outdoor altar. I had seen it from a distance before. The platform of pale stone set on the hilltop above the pack's main settlement, ringed by ancient iron torches. I had watched other ceremonies from below, small enough and unimportant enough to be overlooked in the crowd. Standing at the base of the altar steps with the crowd assembled around the hill, I felt the full weight of it. 1,000 wolves. Every warrior, every elder, every pack mother, every pup old enough to stand. They lined the hillside in concentric rings, firelight catching their faces, the air thick with the communal energy of a gathered pack. Something I had always stood apart from, watched from edges and corners. Tonight I was at the center. I climbed the steps. My dress was simple. I had made it myself from good linen, careful stitching, the silver thread a small extravagance from my years of careful saving. I had no adornments, no family jewels, no Luna's crown. Just the dress and my unbound hair, and the quiet wolf inside me, alert and trembling. Kale climbed from the other side. He was devastating to look at. He always was. But tonight he wore his ceremonial garments. Deep charcoal fabric edged with the silver and black of Ironmoor's pack colors, a clasp at his throat bearing the Donfong sigil. His silver eyes swept the crowd as he ascended, acknowledging his people with the natural ease of a born leader. He did not look toward me. Not until he had to. We met at the top. The High Elder stood between us, the binding cord in his hands, white-spun fiber threaded with silver and moon herb. And behind him, the sacred flame burned in its iron bowl, fed with oil and wolf pine resin. I looked at Kale. He was already looking at me. And for that one moment, just one, something crossed his face that I had never seen there before. Something that was not coldness or strategy or the careful blankness he had maintained for months. It was conflict. Real, raw, almost painful conflict. The bond pulled between us like a living thing. I felt it humming in the air between our bodies, magnetic and ancient, the moon goddess's design made physical. Even at this distance, his scent reached me, pine and cold iron and something warm underneath that my wolf recognized and craved. His nostrils flared. He felt it too. He felt it. And then he looked away from me, out at the assembled crowd, and whatever conflict I had seen was gone. Before the moon goddess and Ironmoor pack, the High Elder began, his aged voice carrying easily across the hilltop silence. We gather to witness the binding of. A moment. Kale's voice cut across the elder's words like a blade. The High Elder stopped. The crowd stilled. I went very, very quiet inside. Kale stepped forward. Not toward me, but to the edge of the altar platform, facing his people. The firelight lit his face in gold and shadow. He was a commanding figure. He had always been that. Every wolf in that crowd felt the weight of his alpha presence. "I have given this careful thought," he said. His voice was even, measured, the voice of a man who had rehearsed this. The bond the moon goddess placed upon me was not chosen for the good of Ironmoor. It was not chosen for the strength of our bloodlines or the stability of our alliances. A brief pause. I do not question the goddess's will. But pack law provides for circumstances where a mating bond conflicts with the greater needs of the alpha's position. My hands were steady. My hands were so steady. Don't let them see. An Omega servant, Kale continued, however the goddess may view her, cannot serve as Luna of Ironmore. Our pack requires strength of lineage. Our alliances, with the Stonecrest pack, with the Velthorn Council, require a Luna of recognized bloodline. He paused again. Just long enough. I refuse this bond. Under Article 12 of the Sacred Pack Accords, an alpha may reject a fated bond on grounds of political necessity, with the Elder Council's ratification. The silence was enormous. 1,000 wolves not breathing. The High Elder's hands were shaking. Alpha Kale, the ceremony has already. Article 12, Kale said again quietly. Firmly. Final. I was still standing at the center of the altar. Still in my white dress. Still with my steady hands. Slowly, because if I moved quickly something inside me would shatter, and they would all see it. I turned my head and looked at Kale Donfong. He was looking at the crowd. He still would not look at me. Somewhere in the assembled pack, I heard someone make a soft sound. Pity, maybe. Or discomfort. The crowd shifted. The way crowds do when witnessing something that sits wrong even in those who would never speak against it. I heard a child's whispered question. What's happening, Mama? And a hushed, strained shh. The High Elder looked at me. His old face was a careful mask, but his eyes said, I am sorry, child. I breathed in. I breathed out. Very well, I said. My voice carried. I made sure of that. I did not whisper it, did not let it shake. I spoke it to the crowd, to the torchlight, to the red moon above us all. Very well. I turned. I walked down the altar steps. I did not look back. I kept walking until I reached the edge of the firelit circle, and then the darkness of the tree line, and then I was alone in the forest with the blood moon above me, and the distant sound of the ceremony resuming behind me. Already pivoting, already moving on, because the pack must always move on. I walked until I couldn't hear it anymore. Then I stopped, and I held the book Elder Brennan had given me against my chest with both hands. And I stood there in the dark, in my white dress, while the bond the moon goddess had given me slowly and agonizingly unwound itself from around my heart. The pain was indescribable, not metaphorical, physical, like something with teeth taking apart my ribcage piece by piece. My wolf howled inside me, a sound of grief, so complete it felt like it would hollow me out entirely. I let her howl. I did not. When it was over, when the last thread of the bond snapped, and the silence that replaced it was more terrible than the pain had been, I was on my knees in the pine needles with my white dress spread around me like something broken. I looked up at the moon, red and full and indifferent. She doesn't make mistakes, Elder Brennan had told me. I thought, then what is this? No answer came. But after a while, after the cold settled into my bones and my wolf curled quietly in the ashes of her grief, I made myself stand. I opened the book. By moonlight, I read the first page. And everything that came before began to make sense. There is a place, it read, in the High Elder's careful, ancient script, where the old power still breathes. Where rank is not given by bloodline, but seized by will. Where a wolf may become what no one believed she could be. It is called the Ashwood Sovereignty. And it is waiting for you, child. I read every word. Then I folded the book carefully, tucked it into the hidden pocket in my dress, and walked north. I did not go back. The Ashwood. Every wolf in the 5 packs knew the name and feared it. A vast, ancient forest that stretched beyond the northern borders of all 5-pack territories. Unmapped, unclaimed, untamable. The kind of place where rogues disappeared and hunting parties returned short of members and refused to speak of what they had seen. Old stories placed it as the first place the moon goddess had set foot when she came to the physical world, and the last place she had wept before leaving it. The trees there, they said, remembered everything. And the wolves who lived within it were unlike any others. I had read about them in Elder Brennan's library. The sovereign wolves. Not a pack by any normal definition. No alpha of bloodline, no Luna, no inherited rank. A gathering of wolves who had rejected the 5-pack system. Cast-offs, exiles, those whose power didn't fit the molds they'd been pressed into, and who had built something different in the deep forest. Something older. Something that answered to the moon goddess directly. I had 3 days of travel through the northern wilderness before I reached the Ashwood boundary markers. Great stones, twice my height, carved with symbols that predated any language I had studied. My wolf pressed forward instinctively even as my human mind catalogued the risk. Rogue territory. Unknown power structure. No allies. No rank. Nothing. Just the book, the clothes on my back, and the hollowed-out space where a bond used to live. At the boundary stones, I stopped. A wolf stepped out of the trees. He was enormous, silver-gray with old battle scars crossing his muzzle, and eyes that were neither the silver of alpha bloodline nor the warm brown of lower ranks, but a pale, pale gold I had never seen before. He stood in partial shift, humanoid but wild, easily 7 feet of muscle and ancient authority. He looked at me for a long time. "You smell of a broken bond," he said. His voice was like gravel and old wood. "Yes," I said. "Whose?" "Kale Donfong, alpha heir of Ironmore." Something moved through the scarred wolf's expression. Not quite recognition, more like confirmation. "And the book," he said, nodding to the outline of it against my dress. "Elder Brennan gave it to me." He was quiet for what felt like a long time. My wolf held herself very still. Not from fear, something more complex than that. The awareness of standing at the edge of something irreversible. "Brennan," the scarred wolf said at last, almost to himself. "Then, come." He turned and walked into the trees. I followed. The Ashwood sovereignty was nothing like what I had imagined. No great stone hall. No banners or torches or ranked warriors lined in display of power. What existed in the heart of the Ashwood was a sprawling, living settlement. Dozens of structures built from living wood and shaped stone, grown over decades into something that felt almost organic. Fire pits rather than hearths. Open sky rather than ceilings where the canopy allowed. Wolves moving through the settlement in every state of shift, from fully human to fully wolf to the partial forms that in normal pack society were only permitted to higher ranks. Here, everyone wore their wolf as they chose. I found out later that the man who had met me at the boundary was called Goran. He was the eldest of the Sovereignty's Council, a body of 7 who led by consensus rather than dominance. He brought me to a clearing at the settlement's heart where a fire burned despite the late hour, and 4 others sat around it. "She is Seraphine Ashvale," Goran said without ceremony. "Brennan sent her. One of the 4, a woman, ageless in the way that wolves who have found their truest power often become, with dark skin and braided silver hair and eyes of that same pale gold, rose to her feet. She was perhaps the most powerful presence I had ever stood near. My wolf, who had been curling quiet and aching since the broken bond, suddenly lifted her head. "You know what you're asking for," the woman said. "Not a question." "I know what I'm looking for," I said. "I don't know yet if this is it." The ghost of something that might have been a smile. "Honest. That's a start." She studied me. "You've been reading. I can smell the library ink and the old texts on you under everything else." "I've been reading for 3 years." "What did you read?" "Everything Elder Brennan let me touch. Pack law, the rights of ascension, the history of the sovereignty." I paused. The theory of will-based power transfer. Now the others around the fire stirred. Exchanged glances. "Will-based power transfer," the silver-haired woman repeated. "Most wolves, even educated ones, dismiss that as mythology." "I don't dismiss things before I understand them," I said. A long silence. Then she nodded once. "My name is Sarah Wildmore," she said. "Yes, the same name as yours. It is not coincidence." A beat. The moon goddess does not deal in coincidence. I stared at her. "I was a rejected Omega once," she said. 40 years ago. From a pack that no longer exists because I made certain choices after being rejected that they were not prepared for." She tilted her head. "You have a broken bond and an empty future and a book full of old instructions. You have a long road ahead of you. It will hurt more than the rejection did. It will require more than you currently have." She paused. "Are you sure?" I thought of the altar, the white dress, the steady hands. "I will make you look at me." "Yes," I said. "Then you sleep tonight, and tomorrow you begin." I slept, and tomorrow I began. What Seraphine found in the Ashwood, what she became inside it, that story takes longer to tell. But let me tell you this much. 3 years is a long time. And the woman who walked into the Ashwood was not the woman who walked out. The first thing Sarah Wildmore taught me was how to breathe. Not the shallow, careful breathing of a servant girl making herself small. Not the controlled, measured breath of someone trying not to cry in public. the deep, ancient breath of a wolf who knows she takes up space in the world and is not sorry for it. Again, Sarah said. We were standing in a moonlit clearing, bare feet on cold earth, the ashwood breathing around us in the way it always did. A living sound, a rhythm, like something enormous sleeping nearby. I breathed. In through the nose, all the way down past the chest into the belly. Hold. Out through the mouth, slow, controlled, deliberate. Better, Sarah said. Now tell me what you smell. I filtered the night air the way she had been teaching me. Not passively, the way most wolves received scent. Actively. Intentionally. Like reading. Pine resin, I said. Frost coming from the northeast. 3 wolves on the eastern perimeter. 2 in full shift, 1 in partial. A fire burning somewhere behind the main settlement. And, I paused. And, something older than all of it. Underneath everything else. I searched for the word. Like stone that's been warm for a very long time. Sarah was quiet for a moment. That, she said, is the ashwood itself. You can smell it. She paused. Most newcomers take months to distinguish it. You found it in 3 weeks. I looked at her. Is that significant? Everything is significant, she said. Nothing here happens by accident. She turned and walked back toward the settlement, her silver braid catching the moonlight. Come, she said. Today we work on something harder. The sovereignty trained differently from any pack I had read about. In Iron Moor, training was hierarchy. Alphas led. Betas followed. Omegas watched from a respectful distance and stayed out of the way. In the Ashwood, training was elemental. Every wolf, regardless of what rank they had carried before coming here, started from nothing. You learned your wolf before you learned anything else. Not the rank your wolf had been assigned by bloodline or pack structure, but the wolf's actual nature, her actual power, her actual voice. Mine had been called weak for as long as I could remember. Small, quiet, unimpressive. That was what the servants said, what the warriors said, what Kale Dawnfang's silence had said every time he walked past me without acknowledgement. Sarah Wildmore said something different. Your wolf has been living in a cage, she told me, on the morning of my 30th day in the Ashwood, as we sat across from each other in the shifting clearing where the sovereignty conducted their deepest training. Not a cage anyone built for her. A cage you built for her. To keep her safe. To keep her small enough that no one felt threatened by her. I felt something tighten in my chest. A wolf who is never threatened, Sarah continued, is never dangerous. And you have spent your entire life making very sure you were never dangerous. It was survival, I said. It was, she agreed. And it kept you alive. But survival and living are not the same thing. She met my eyes. Let her out, Seraphine. All of her. Whatever size she actually is, let her out. I don't know how. You do. Sarah's pale gold eyes were steady. You've always known. You just needed someone to tell you it was permitted. I breathed. In. Down. Hold. Out. And then, for the first time in my life, I stopped pulling back. I had always shifted with control. Careful, managed, minimal. Just enough wolf to function. Just enough to fulfill my Omega duties during pack ceremonies. This time I let go. The shift came from somewhere I didn't know I had. It wasn't painful. Most wolves describe shifting as painful, especially in the early years. The bones and the body fighting each other, the wolf and the human at war for the same space. Mine didn't fight. She emerged. Like something had been held underwater finally allowed to surface. She was not small. I had always believed she was small. My entire life, every assessment, every ranking, every dismissive glance, had told me my wolf was small and weak and unworthy of notice. She was not small. She was the largest wolf I had ever seen outside of an alpha. Pale gray-white, almost silver, with a black marking that ran from the crown of her skull down her spine like a line of authority written in ink. She stood in the clearing, and the ashwood went completely silent around her. Then it exhaled, as if it had been waiting. Sarah Wildmore looked at my wolf for a long, long moment. Then she turned away, and I saw, in the line of her shoulders, something she was very carefully keeping from her face. I shifted back. Sarah, I said quietly. She turned back. Her expression was composed again, but her pale gold eyes were very bright. You already know, don't you? She said. It was not a question. I thought about what I had read. The rites of ascension. The will-based power theory. The old texts that predated the 5-pack system by centuries, that spoke of a kind of wolf who appeared rarely. Perhaps once in a generation, perhaps less. A wolf chosen directly. Not by bloodline. Not by pack rank. By the moon goddess herself. Tell me I'm wrong, I said. Sarah was quiet for a very long time. The marking on her spine, she said finally. The sovereignty has a name for it. I waited. The sovereignty calls it the lunar brand. She paused. It only appears on wolves who are meant to become something the normal pack hierarchy has no category for. My wolf paced quietly inside me. How many? I asked. In the last 400 years. Sarah looked at me. 2. I breathed. I was the first, she said quietly. And I became what I became. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. I knew what Sarah Wildmore was. I had read it in the sovereignty's oldest text, the one Goran had placed in my hands at the end of my first week. A text not given to newcomers, Goran had told me, in living memory. She was a sovereign alpha, the only rank above the 5-pack alpha structure. Ancient, unrecognized by the modern packs, because no one had held it in 40 years, and they had convinced themselves it was mythology. The second, I said slowly. Sarah nodded once. The ashwood exhaled again around us, that vast ancient breath. I looked up through the canopy at the pale winter sky. The moon goddess does not make mistakes. No, she doesn't. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. And the best. I trained before dawn and after dark. Combat with Goran, brutal, efficient. The fighting style of the sovereignty, which bore no resemblance to the controlled sparring of Ironmore's warriors. Goran fought like the forest itself, unpredictable, patient, and capable of devastating force without warning. He broke my shoulder on the 45th day. Good, he said, watching me hold the joint with both hands, breathing through the pain. Now get up. I got up. I always got up. Pack law and ancient rites with Sarah. The kind of deep structural knowledge that most alphas received over years of formal education with their fathers and council elders. I had none of that background. I built it from nothing, cramming years of context into months of intensive study, filling the gaps with questions that sometimes made even Sarah go quiet and think before answering. I also learned the sovereignty's specific power. Will-based transfer was not mythology. It was ancient pre-bloodline power structure. The original way wolves had organized before rank became hereditary. The idea was breathtakingly simple. Power could be given, inherited, or taken, not through combat alone, through a specific confluence of will, the goddess's recognition, and the lunar bond. An alpha could be made without bloodline, if the moon goddess recognized the wolf, if the lunar brand was present, if the will was strong enough. I understood now why Elder Brennan had been quietly building me for 3 years. He had seen the brand during a ceremony my first winter in Ironmore. Not on my wolf, which I never fully shifted in the pack, but in my eyes. A specific quality of light. He had known. He had known, and he had spent 3 years making sure I had the knowledge to survive what the moon goddess intended for me. I would find out, much later, that he had sent Elder Sarah a letter 6 months before Kale's rejection. Ceremony. She is coming, the letter had said. Be ready. My wolf grew. Not in the way I mean physically, though in partial shift she was larger every month, broader across the shoulders, more rooted in the earth. I mean she grew in the way that matters. She found her voice. The sovereignty heard it for the first time on the night of the spring blood moon. My first year in the Ashwood. I had been there 9 months. The full pack gathered in the central clearing for the monthly ceremony, and when the moon rose, I tilted my head back and howled. Every wolf in the clearing went still. Then, one by one, beginning with the pups who couldn't help themselves, then the elders who didn't need to, they answered. Goran, standing beside me, said nothing for a long time. Then, that's an alpha's call. I looked at him. A sovereign alpha's call, he corrected, and something in his scarred, ancient face was soft for just a moment. I haven't heard one since Sarah herself. I turned my face back to the moon. I was 20 years old. I had been rejected at an altar less than a year ago, and the old power of the world was waking up inside my bones. Let them underestimate you, I thought. Let them all underestimate you. One more time. While I was becoming something new in the Ashwood, Ironmore was quietly falling apart. I did not know this at the time. Information traveled slowly beyond pack borders, and the sovereignty kept deliberately removed from 5-pack politics. But Goran monitored the borders, and Sarah kept her own intelligence through channels I never fully mapped. Pieces of it reached me over the months. First, Kale's chosen alliance. After the rejection ceremony, Kale had moved forward with his political plan without pause. The efficiency of a man who had rehearsed the aftermath as carefully as the act itself. He had approached the Stonecrest Pack's alpha within a fortnight, proposing the match between himself and Stonecrest's eldest daughter, a purebred Luna named Mira of pure Golden Wolf lineage. The alliance was formally announced before summer. The packs, most of them, accepted it. Most. What Kale had not accounted for was the bond. Not my bond. His. Because while Article 12 of the Sacred Pack Accords permitted an alpha to reject a fated mate on political grounds, it did not, could not, erase what the moon goddess had written. It simply suppressed it, like a wound sealed with mud instead of medicine. And wounds sealed wrong do not heal. They fester. The second thing I learned, Kale was struggling. His wolf, by all the second-hand accounts Goran received through border scouts and traveling merchants, had grown erratic since the ceremony. The silver-eyed focus and control that marked the Donfong bloodline was fraying at edges that the pack was beginning to notice. His partial shifts during council meetings were harder to contain. His temper, always iron-controlled, had slipped twice publicly, once badly enough that a senior warrior had been left bleeding in the training yard for something that would previously have earned only a reprimand. The bond's suppression was costing him. I listened to these reports with carefully managed stillness. "Does that satisfy you?" Goran asked once, after delivering a particularly detailed account of Kale's deteriorating composure. I thought about the question honestly. "No," I said. That he raised an eyebrow. "It would be easier if it did," I said. "Satisfaction would mean I've stopped caring." "I haven't stopped caring. I've simply redirected it." Goran studied me. "Into what?" "Into something useful," I said. He nodded slowly. He seemed to find that acceptable. The third thing, Kale's father. Alpha Aldrich had been ailing before the ceremony. Age and old battle wounds combining into a slow decline that the pack healers were managing but could not reverse. By the time I had been in the Ashwood for a year and a half, word reached us that Aldrich had formally stepped down from the alpha seat and transferred authority to Kale. Kale was now alpha of Ironmoor, the most powerful of the 5 packs. He had what he had rejected me to get. I wondered if it felt the way he had imagined. The fourth thing took longer to arrive. It came at the end of my second year in the Ashwood, carried by a traveler who passed through sovereignty territory on the way north, a healer wolf seeking rare herbs in the deep forest. Goran intercepted her at the boundary, read her intent as neutral, and allowed her passage on the condition that she share any news from the south. She shared quite a lot. Kale's alliance with Stonecrest was fracturing. The chosen Luna, Mira, had been installed as consort, the closest the packs came to Luna without a formal mating mark. But the mating bond between Kale and Mira had never activated. A chosen pairing without a bond was not unheard of, but it required both parties to accept the formal marking ceremony that replaced it. Kale had not completed the marking. 3 times it had been scheduled. 3 times, by the healer's account, something had intervened, or been made to intervene. The Stonecrest Alpha was growing impatient. The alliance was contingent on the formal union. Without it, the political arrangement was paper, not stone. And the whispers in Ironmoor's great hall, the healer told Goran with the careful diplomacy of someone choosing her words. The whispers said that Alpha Kale woke some nights with his wolf in partial shift, the air in his chambers smelling of old pine resin and something broken, and that he never spoke of it, that he had begun refusing his evening meals, that he sat some nights at the window of the Alpha's tower and looked north. I listened to all of this in Goran's planning room, seated across from him and Sarah while the fire burned low between us. When the healer finished and was shown to guest quarters, Goran looked at me. I was quiet for a long time. "He's feeling the bond's absence," Sarah said. "Not gently. Clinically. The suppression was always going to have a cost. The longer it holds, the more it erodes the wolf's fundamental stability." She tilted her head. "He is an alpha. He has more capacity to endure it than most wolves would. But even alphas have limits." "I know," I said. "Seraphine." Goran's voice was careful. "What are you thinking?" I looked up. "I'm thinking," I said slowly, "that we are running out of time for the natural progression of events." Both of them watched me. "The 5 packs need a sovereign alpha," I said. "The sovereignty has been waiting 40 years for one. The situation in Ironmoor is going to reach a breaking point. The Stonecrest Alliance fails, the pack fractures, the other 4 packs start to circle. If there is no stabilizing authority, there will be a war, Goran said quietly. Yes. Sarah leaned forward. You're not ready. I know. You need another year minimum. The ascension rite alone requires. I know, I said again. I'm not saying now. I met her pale gold eyes. I'm saying we need to accelerate. A silence. Goran and Sarah exchanged a look I had learned to read over 2 years. The look of 2 very old, very experienced wolves recalculating something they had planned carefully and now needed to revise. Accelerate, Goran repeated. I'll train through the winter without rest days, I said. The law study. I'll complete the remaining texts in 6 months instead of 12. The ascension rite. I looked at Sarah. You completed it in 4 nights. The records say 8 is standard. I can do it in 5. Sarah's expression was unreadable. The ascension rite nearly killed me, she said quietly. And I was the most prepared wolf this sovereignty had trained in living memory. I know the risk, I said. Do you? She held my gaze. The firelight moved between us. Because knowing it academically and facing it alone in the sacred grove at midnight with the moon goddess's full attention on you are very different experiences. I breathed. In. Down. Hold. Out. I have been rejected and broken and exiled, I said. I have rebuilt from nothing in unfamiliar territory while carrying the weight of a severed bond. I have been underestimated by every wolf I have ever encountered except the 2 of you and Elder Brennan. I paused. I know the risk, and I am choosing to take it. That is what the lunar brand means. Not that I am protected from the cost, but that I am capable of paying it. A very long silence. Goran let out a slow breath. Then he stood, moved to the shelf of carved stone tablets against the wall, the sovereignty's records, and pulled one free. He brought it to the table and turned it to face me. The accelerated ascension protocol. The version that, he told me, had only been used twice in the sovereignty's known history. Read it tonight, he said. Tomorrow we decide. I read it that night. The next morning, we decided 0.6 months of accelerated preparation felt like 6 years lived at triple speed. I will not bore you with every dawn to dusk training session, every ancient text memorized by firelight, every combat bout that left me aching in places I had not known could ache. I will tell you only the shape of it, the arc of what those months made of me. I became fluent in pack law at a depth most sitting alphas had never achieved. Not the surface law, the accords and articles and formal decrees, but the deep law, the ancient agreements that predated written record and lived in the sovereignty's oral traditions and carved stone tablets. The law that would govern a sovereign alpha's authority. The law that the 5-pack system had been built around and had spent generations trying to forget. I became a fighter that Goran called, on the last day of formal combat training, with the quiet directness of a man who did not give compliments easily. Formidable. Not elegant. Not flashy. Formidable. The kind of fighter who reads a situation before the first move and positions herself, so that the ending is decided before the engagement begins. The kind of fighter who, if she chooses to engage at all, has already won. My wolf continued to grow into herself in the way that the sovereignty wolves grew. Not quickly, not in the burst of youth, but with the deep, root-down settling of something that intended to be permanent. By the 6th month, when I stood in full partial shift, I was the largest wolf in the sovereignty by a margin that made even the senior wolves step back involuntarily. Not from fear, from recognition. The same instinct that makes wolves bow to a true alpha. Not the trained submission of pack hierarchy, but the ancient, bone-level acknowledgement of something that outranks them in the fundamental order of their world. I had felt it before, with Kale in the early days of the bond. The difference was that I had been wrong about what I was feeling then. I had assumed the pull was toward him. It wasn't. It was mine, flowing out from me and responding to itself in him. The bond had been the moon goddess showing me what I was capable of, using the nearest available mirror. He had been the mirror. The light had always been mine. The ascension rite began on the night of the winter blood moon. The sovereignty gathered at the sacred grove 3 miles into the Ashwood's deepest territory, a place I had been permitted to enter only twice before, and only in daylight, only with Sarah. At night it was different. At night the sacred grove breathed differently. Every ancient tree had been marked at its base with the sovereignty's lunar symbols, carved so long ago that the wood had healed around them, incorporated them. The grove itself was roughly circular, perhaps 40 feet across, with a flat central stone that served as the ritual's focus point. The blood moon hung enormous above the open canopy. Every member of the sovereignty had assembled at the grove's edge. 37 wolves, from Goran, who had been here since before I was born, to a 12-year-old pup who had been brought to the Ashwood by her exiled mother 2 years ago, and who now watched the proceedings with wide, solemn eyes. Sarah stood before the central stone. She had dressed in the full ceremonial garments of a sovereign alpha for the first time since her own ascension. Deep midnight fabric edged with silver, the lunar brand mark embossed across the chest in pale thread. She looked like what she was: ageless, terrifying, magnificent. I stood before her in white. Not the white dress of a mating ceremony. Something different. Something I had made myself in the weeks before, from the white wolf linen Goran had provided without explanation, and the silver thread Sarah had placed on my workbench without comment. No adornment, no jewelry, just the fabric and my unbound hair and my steady hands. "Seraphine Ashvale," Sarah said, and her voice in the sacred grove carried in a way that defied the physics of open air. Not loud, but everywhere, touching every wolf in the circle simultaneously. "You stand before the sovereignty and the moon goddess to claim what has been placed within you by divine will. You stand to accept the weight of what you are and the responsibility of what you will become." She paused. "There is no going back," she said, and this was not ceremony. This was her looking at me directly, woman to woman, mentor to student, wolf to wolf. "Not from this. Not ever. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said. "The rite will test what you are made of. Not your training. Not your knowledge. Not your strength." She held my gaze. "What you are made of. At the core. Below everything you have built and learned and chosen." Her pale gold eyes were very steady. "If there is anything hollow in you, anything built on pretense rather than truth, the rite will find it." "I know," I said. "Then kneel." I knelt on the flat central stone. The sovereignty began to howl. It started with Goran, low, ancient, resonant, and spread outward through the assembled wolves in a rising chorus that built and built until the sacred grove was vibrating with it, until the trees themselves seemed to lean inward, until the blood moon overhead appeared closer than it had any physical right to be. Sarah placed both hands on my head, and the moon goddess arrived. I don't have words for what happened next that would do it justice in ordinary language. I will try. It was like being turned inside out, but not violently, with the terrible care of something that knows exactly what it's doing and is doing it precisely. Every layer of me peeled back. The servant girl who learned to be invisible. The reader who stayed awake by dying firelight. The woman at the altar with the steady hands. The wolf who had spent her whole life being told she was small. All of it examined. I felt the moon goddess the way you feel a fire from very close. Not comfortable warmth, but the edge of too much heat. The awareness that what is before you could consume you entirely if the distance changed by 1 foot. She was not gentle. She was not unkind. She was simply vast in a way that made every human construct, rank, bloodline, rejection, ceremony, politics, fall away like ash. She looked at what I was made of, and I felt the examination of it. Every fear, every doubt, every moment I had been hurt and chosen to endure rather than break. Every book I had read in the dark. Every training session I had stood back up from. Every time I had breathed through pain and kept my hands steady and not let them see. And then, at the bottom of all of it, at the very core, the thing below every built thing. A wolf. She was not small. She had never been small. She had been sleeping. The goddess's attention focused there, at that sleeping wolf's core. And I felt something I had no name for. Recognition, maybe. Acknowledgement. The specific, devastating sensation of being fully, completely, terrifyingly seen by something that misses nothing. Yes, the sensation said. Not in words. Not in language. Yes, this one. Her. And the power that had been coiled inside me since birth, that I had spent years unknowingly pressing down, folding smaller, hiding for survival, was released. The lunar brand ignited. From the inside. I was told later that the grove went silent for 4 seconds. Every wolf. No howl, no breath, no movement. Then the sacred grove's ancient trees, which had stood for centuries, which bore marks of every sovereignty ceremony in living memory, glowed. Silver light, rising from the carved symbols at their bases, running up through the bark and into the branches and leaves, filling the entire grove with a light that was neither moonlight nor fire, but something older than both. I heard the 37 wolf howl begin again before I could see anything. And when I could see again, I was standing on the stone. I did not remember rising. And Sarah was on her knee before me. Sarah Wildmore, Sovereign Alpha of the Ashwood Sovereignty, the most powerful wolf I had ever known. On her knee. Behind her, one by one, Goran and all 35 others. The 12-year-old girl with wide eyes. The scarred old warriors. The exiled wolves who had come here from broken lives and built something true. All of them. Sovereign Alpha, Sarah said, and her voice in the glowing grove was steady and clear and proud. The moon goddess has spoken. I looked up at the blood moon. I had made a promise on an altar 3 years ago, in a white dress with steady hands. I will make you look at me. I will make you all look. The time for that was coming. I could feel it, not in the bond that had been broken, but in something deeper and truer than any bond. In my own bones. In my own wolf. In the lunar brand that burned silver warm along my spine. I was ready. The letter went out on the first day of spring. Not letters, plural. One letter. One copy, made in triplicate on sovereignty parchment, old, dark, heavy stock that the 5 packs had not seen in 40 years and would recognize immediately for what it was. Sealed with black wax pressed with the lunar brand mark. Carried by 3 sovereignty riders, one to each of the 3 most senior pack alphas in the region. The 4th and 5th packs would hear through them. Word traveled fast when it needed to. I wrote it myself, by candlelight, in the cramped planning room where Goran and I had spent hundreds of hours over 3 years. Sarah sat across from me while I wrote. She did not help with the wording. She had told me, very specifically, that the letter had to come entirely from me. Because they will read it for weakness, she said. They will read every word for the handwriting of someone who learned authority secondhand. It has to sound like you. How does authority sound? I asked. Like it doesn't need to explain itself, she said. I wrote the letter 3 times. The 3rd version was the one I sealed. To the Alpha Council of the 5 packs. By the authority of the moon goddess and the ancient law of the sovereign accord, which predates your current structure and supersedes it in all matters of interpack governance. You are hereby notified of the following. A sovereign alpha has been recognized and ascended. The Ashwood sovereignty is no longer a reclusive body. You are summoned to the border stones of the northern Ashwood in 30 days to formally acknowledge the sovereign alpha's authority, as required by the accord your founders signed before the first pack borders were drawn. Attendance is not optional. Non-attendance will be treated as a declaration of secession from the accord, the legal consequences of which I trust your elders will be pleased to explain. Come without armies. Come without theater. Come prepared to conduct yourself with the dignity your ranks demand. The moon goddess is watching. Seraphine Ashvale Sovereign Alpha. Ashwood Sovereignty. Sarah read it when I was done. She was quiet for a long time. Then she looked up at me, and the expression on her face was one I had never seen on her before. Pride. Clean, uncomplicated, unguarded. You left out your former pack designation, she said. Intentionally, I said. They will notice. Good, I said. Let them wonder how long I've been nobody's omega before they realize what I've become. Sarah folded the letter carefully and passed it back. Send it, she said. The sovereignty riders left at dawn. I stood at the Ashwood boundary and watched them go. 3 wolves in the sovereignty's dark riding cloaks, their horses bred from the hardy northern stock that navigated the forest trails without flinching, moving south with the quiet, unhurried certainty of wolves who knew they were carrying something significant. Goran stood beside me. How long before he knows? I asked. He didn't ask who I meant. His copy arrives last, Goran said. We routed the Velthorn and Stonecrest riders first. By the time Ironmoor's rider reaches him, the other alphas will have already had the letter for 2 days. Meaning Kale would hear about the summons from them before he received his own copy. Meaning he would spend 2 days knowing something was coming and not knowing exactly what. I had designed it that way. You're making him wait, Goran said, with something that might have been approval. I'm giving him time to remember what he chose, I said. 3 years ago he stood at an altar and chose. This is the consequence arriving. I turned away from the boundary. He should have time to feel it coming. Goran was quiet a moment. There will be alphas who refuse the summons, he said. I know. Stonecrest Alpha Briar is proud. He has invested 3 years in this alliance with Ironmoor. His daughter's position. I know, I said again. That's his problem. He has 400 warriors. I glanced at Goran sidelong. He almost smiled. Continue, he said. The 30 days before the summit were not quiet ones. Sovereignty scouts reported movement in all 5 pact territories. Not military movement, not yet, but the restless kind that preceded it. Councils convening. Senior warriors being recalled from border posts. Messengers moving between packs at unusual frequency. The 5 packs were rattled. Good. On the 18th day, a lone rider appeared at the Ashwood boundary carrying a sealed response. Not from Ironmoor. From Velthorn, the second largest pack, led by an older alpha named Crestvale, who had the reputation of a strategist and the patience of someone who had survived 3 alpha transitions and knew better than most wolves when a tide was turning. The response was brief. We will attend. We look forward to meeting the sovereign alpha. Alpha Crestvale, Velthorn pack. I read it twice. Then I set it aside and waited for the others. On the 22nd day, Stonecrest responded. Longer letter. More elaborate language. Alpha Briar, as expected, pushed back, cited 3 separate obscure accord subclauses suggesting the summons was procedurally irregular, questioned the validity of the sovereignty's ascension right without Pack Council witnesses, noted that his continued cooperation with the Sovereign Accord framework was contingent on satisfactory clarification of several outstanding matters. In other words, he was coming, but he wanted me to know he wasn't happy about it. I wrote back 3 lines. Your objections are noted. Your attendance is still required. The Moon Goddess does not accept procedural objections. I sent it the same day. On the 26th day, the Ironmoor response arrived. I was in the training clearing with Goran when Sarah brought it to me personally. She held it out without comment. Her expression gave nothing away. I took it. The Ironmoor seal was black wax pressed with the Dawnfang sigil. Twin wolves, back to back, a crescent moon between them. I had seen that seal on documents in Ironmoor's hall my entire childhood. On formal declarations. On trading agreements. On the exile orders of wolves who had violated pack law. My name was on the outside, in handwriting I had never seen before. Cale had not written it. He would have dictated it to his council scribe. I broke the seal. The letter was 2 pages. Formal language. Pack Council letterhead. Senior council member signatures in a column down the left margin. But the last paragraph was different. The handwriting changed halfway through a sentence. Abruptly, mid-thought, switching from the scribe's careful formal script to something rougher, harder. The pen pressed more deeply into the parchment. His handwriting. He had taken the letter from the scribe and finished it himself. Ironmoor will attend the summit as required by Accord law. The Alpha Council recognizes the procedural legitimacy of the summons and will present accordingly. And then in that rougher, deeper hand, I would know the name Ashvale anywhere. I would know it in complete darkness. Come south, Seraphine. We have a great deal to discuss. That was all. No signature below the personal edition. No formal closing. Just those 2 sentences, pressed deeply into the parchment in his hand. I read them twice. Then I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the book Elder Brennan had given me, against my chest. Sarah was still watching me. Well, she said. He knows, I said. Of course he knows. He's not running from it. No. Sarah tilted her head slightly. That tells you something. I thought about what it told me. Cale Dawnfang, the most powerful alpha in the 5 packs, the man who had stood at a sacred altar and publicly rejected me, the man who had chosen political alliance over the Moon Goddess's design, had taken a pen from his scribe's hand and written me 2 sentences that no council record would ever fully capture. He knew, and he was not hiding. It tells me, I said slowly, that his wolf is closer to the surface than he can control. Sarah made a small sound of agreement. It tells me, I continued, that 3 years of suppressing a sovereign alpha bond has done exactly what the old text said it would do. And what is that? I looked up from the letter. It's made him desperate, I said. And desperate alphas make mistakes. Goran, who had been listening silently from the edge of the clearing, spoke for the first time. Don't underestimate him, he said. Desperate and wounded does not mean weak. A wolf cornered by his own choices is still a wolf. I met Goran's pale gold eyes. I know, I said. I'm not underestimating him. I paused. I'm accounting for him. Goran held my gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once, turned, and went back to the training ground. 4 days remained before the summit. I spent them preparing. The morning of the summit, the Ashwood itself seemed to know. The ancient forest was quieter than usual. Not the quiet of emptiness, but the held-breath quiet of something paying attention. Even the wind moved differently, deliberate and directional, pushing through the canopy from north to south as if the trees were exhaling toward what was coming. I dressed in the full Sovereign Alpha ceremonial garments. Sarah had laid them out the night before. Midnight fabric, deeply dark, almost black, but with a subtle depth to it that caught firelight and shifted, showing layers of blue and silver underneath. The lunar brand mark was embossed on the chest in silver thread, raised and clear. A cloak of deep charcoal wolf fur over my shoulders, clasped with a disc of polished obsidian bearing the sovereignty's ancient mark. No crown, no excessive adornment. Authority did not need decoration. I braided the front sections of my hair back from my face, the rest unbound, the way wolves wore it when they were not trying to minimize themselves. And I stood before the polished stone that served as the sovereignty's mirror and looked at myself for a long moment. The servant girl who had carried firewood through Ironmoor's courtyard was not visible in that reflection. She was still in there, I knew that. She would always be in there. Her steadiness, her patience, her ability to endure. But she was no longer the surface. The surface was this. Silver-eyed. My eyes had shifted permanently during the ascension rite, pale and luminous in a way that made wolves who didn't know me step back, and still and certain. A wolf who knew what she was. I turned away from the mirror. "Let's go," I said to my wolf. She stirred, stretched, and settled. We were ready. The border stones were a natural formation. 7 massive standing stones arranged in a rough semicircle at the northern edge of all 5-pack territories, the point where their borders technically converged without any of them having formal claim. The sovereignty's territory pressed against the northern side. The ground was old here, older than the packs. The grass grew differently, thicker and darker, and the air had a particular quality, clean and slightly charged like the air before lightning. The sovereignty wolves arrived first. 37 wolves, in their best riding cloaks, arranged in a loose formation behind me as I took my position at the center of the stone semicircle. Goran to my left, Sarah to my right. The others fanned back. The 5-pack alphas began arriving within the hour. Velthorn first. Alpha Crest Vale on a dark horse, a small retinue of 6 behind him, his manner measured and observant. He was older than I had imagined from his letters. Deep lines in a weathered face, gray at his temples, the kind of stillness that came from decades of careful survival. He dismounted at the tree line, left his horse with an attendant, and walked to the stones with the unhurried gait of a man who had decided to make no decisions until he had seen everything. His eyes found me immediately. I held his gaze. Something shifted in his face. A microscopic adjustment that I might have missed before 3 years of sovereignty training had sharpened my reading of wolves past all normal capacity. Surprise, recalibrated in real time into something more like reckoning. He dipped his head. Not a submission, an acknowledgement. I returned it fractionally. He took a position to the northeast and waited. Stonecrest next. Alpha Briar was exactly what I had expected. Broad and red-faced and armored as though attending a war rather than a diplomatic summit. A retinue of 12 wolves in full battle leathers behind him. He scanned the stones with the aggressive focus of a man looking for something to object to. His gaze landed on me. Held. I saw him reassess. The sovereignty's formal presence was clearly larger than he had anticipated. My own presentation was clearly not what he had imagined when he had received a letter signed by a name he didn't recognize. He settled into position with the stiff correctness of someone holding himself back. Behind him, at a slight distance from the main Stonecrest retinue, stood a young woman in a pale gold cloak. Mira, Kale's chosen consort. Stonecrest's daughter. She was beautiful. I registered it clinically, the way I registered weather. Tall, composed, golden-haired, with the posture of someone raised to be looked at and the careful blankness of someone who had learned, as I had learned, that showing too much is dangerous. Her eyes moved over the assembled sovereignty wolves, then found me, and something crossed her face that I had not expected. Not hostility. Recognition. Not of me specifically, we had never met, but of something she saw in me. Something she understood without being told. I filed that away. The other 2 packs, Ashvin and Redthorn, arrived in quick succession, Smaller retinues, less dramatic presentations, the unmistakable posture of packs that were here to watch rather than contest. 5 minutes passed. 10. Everyone assembled looked north. Then south. Toward Ironmoor. I felt him before I heard the horses. The bond, severed, broken, 3 years dead, should have felt nothing. Instead, something stirred in the place where it had been. Not the bond itself. The scar of it, like an old wound aching before a change in weather. My Wolf went very still. I know, I told her. I know. The Ironmoor retinue came through the southern tree line. 8 riders in Ironmoor's silver and black. A formation that would have been more at home in a military procession than a diplomatic one. Tight, controlled, deliberate. Everything about it saying, "We are a power, and we remember it even here." He rode at the front. I had not seen Kale Donfong in 3 years. The distance and the intervening time and the complete transformation of my own life had made it possible to think of him in the abstract. As a concept, an obstacle, a political variable. The man who had rejected me. The alpha whose fracturing alliance I had been monitoring for months. Seeing him was different. He was 30 now. He had been 27 on the altar. Those 3 years had changed him. He was larger, broader through the shoulders in the way of alphas who have fully grown into their authority. His silver eyes, even from this distance, were sharper. He wore his authority with the practiced ease of someone who had spent 3 years having no choice but to inhabit it fully. But underneath all of that, something frayed. I could see it, the fine, invisible cracking at the edges of him, the thing that was not quite visible until you knew what to look for. His wolf was too close to the surface. His control was intact but effortful in a way that an alpha of his calibers should never be. He looked like a man holding something enormous at arm's length for a very long time. And he was looking at me. The moment he cleared the tree line, his gaze had found mine and fixed there with the precision of something magnetic. He pulled his horse up at the stones. His retinue arranged itself behind him, and for a long, stretched, absolute moment, the border stones were completely silent. Every wolf present felt it, the specific quality of the space between us. Not everyone knew what they were feeling, but they felt it. Eyes moved between us. Alpha Crest Vale of Velthorn went very still with the stillness of a wolf who had just understood something significant. Kale dismounted. He was taller than I remembered. He walked to the assembly point slowly, with the deliberate pace of a man choosing every footfall, and took his position among the other alphas. His eyes did not leave me. I held his gaze. Across 30 feet of ancient ground, in the shadow of the 7 standing stones, with 5-pack alphas and 40-odd wolves watching, we looked at each other. 3 years of silence. 3 years of breaking. 3 years of becoming. All of it between us in the space of a held breath. Then I moved to the center stone, the largest, a great flat-topped pillar that served as the summit speaking platform. And I stepped up, and I spoke. "You were summoned under the sovereign accord," I said. My voice carried across the stones the way a sovereign alpha's voice was meant to. Not loudly, but deeply, with a resonance that found the bones rather than just the ears. 3 years ago, I had been an Omega whose name most wolves in this region would not have known. Every wolf at the border stones was listening now. The accord was signed before the first pack border was drawn, I continued. It established the framework your entire structure is built on. It also established provisions that your current system has been content to ignore for 40 years because the position that enforces them has been vacant. I let that settle. It is no longer vacant. Alpha Briar of Stonecrest shifted his weight. The position of Sovereign Alpha, I said, carries authority that supersedes individual alpha rule in matters of interpack governance, treaty law, territorial disputes, and pack law violations that cross borders. I paused. This means that several ongoing situations in the 5-pack region fall under my jurisdiction. I will be addressing them. I looked across the assembled alphas. Specifically, the unresolved territorial dispute between Velthorn and Ashfin that has been escalating for 2 years. The Redthorn succession crisis. And I let my gaze move, finally, to Ironmoor. To Kale. The formal status of outstanding violations of the sacred mating accord within Ironmoor's pack governance. The silence that followed was absolute. Alpha Briar found his voice first. The sacred mating accord is a matter of individual pack jurisdiction. It is not, I said, without heat, without raising my volume by a single degree. Article 7 of the Sovereign Accord is very clear on this. I trust your elders have had 30 days to review the relevant sections, since I noted in my summons that attendance should include prepared council representatives. I looked at him. Did you bring yours? A pause. Yes, he said stiffly. Good. We'll review Article 7 together after the formal acknowledgement. I returned to the assembled group, which brings us to the immediate business. By the terms of the accord, each Alpha present must formally acknowledge the sovereign Alpha's authority before any other summit business can proceed. I let the weight of it sit. I will remind you that this acknowledgement is not a political choice. It is a legal obligation that your predecessors incurred on behalf of your packs when they signed the original accord. You inherited the benefits of that document. You inherit its obligations as well. I stepped down from the center stone, and I waited. Crestvale of Velthorn moved first. He crossed the ground between us with the unhurried certainty of a man who had already made his decision before arriving, and he stopped before me and lowered himself to one knee. Velthorn acknowledges the sovereign Alpha, he said, with the clear, formal cadence of a wolf who had clearly rehearsed the ancient wording. By the accord and the moon goddess's will. Velthorn is acknowledged, I said. He rose. Redthorn followed. Then Ashvin. 2 more Alphas, 2 more acknowledgements, each one settling the precedent further. Briar of Stonecrest came forth. He did not look happy about it, but he came, and he knelt. Stonecrest acknowledges, he said, the words bitten off at their edges. The sovereign Alpha. Stonecrest is acknowledged, I said evenly. He rose and stepped back. 1 Alpha remaining. The border stones waited. Kale Donfong, Alpha of Ironmoor, the most powerful of the 5 packs. The man who had stood at a sacred altar 3 years ago and chosen political power over the moon goddess's design, walked forward. He stopped before me, close enough that I could smell him. Pine and cold iron, and that warm underneath that my wolf had never forgotten, no matter how deep I had buried the memory. His silver eyes were fixed on mine. There were 100 things moving through them. Things I had time to read now, things I could catalog with the precision of 3 years of training layered over a lifetime of watching this specific face. Conflict, recognition, something that sat in the wreckage of pride and was not quite humility and was not quite shame, but was adjacent to both. And underneath all of it, raw and undeniable and 3 years in the making, grief. He had grieved this. The knowledge of it moved through me without warning, bypassed every defense I had built, and landed somewhere central and unprotected. I kept my face still. He held my gaze for one more moment. Then Kale Donfong, Alpha of Ironmoor, silver-eyed heir of the Donfong bloodline, the most powerful wolf in the 5-pack region, lowered himself to one knee before me. A sound moved through the assembled wolves. Not a gasp, something. Quieter. The collective intake of witnesses understanding that they were seeing history. Ironmoor acknowledges the sovereign Alpha, he said. His voice was steady, but his hands, I noticed, pressed against his knee in the formal posture of acknowledgement. His hands were not. Ironmoor is acknowledged, I said. The words came out steady. I was proud of that. He rose, and we looked at each other, 3 feet apart, in the shadow of the ancient stones. And he said quietly, too quietly for most of the assembled wolves to catch, but not too quietly for me. I would know your eyes anywhere, even silver. My wolf stirred. I breathed. In. Down. Hold. Out. We have business to conduct, Alpha Kale, I said at the same volume, measured and even. Shall we proceed? Something moved through his face. Not the conflict from before. Something worse. Something that looked, from the inside of his silver eyes, very much like a man realizing the full weight of what he had done. Not in the abstract, not as a political error, but as a wound he had inflicted on something that had been precious, and was now wearing a face he could barely look at without it costing him. Yes, he said. Let's proceed. We proceeded. The formal summit business took the remainder of the afternoon. I conducted it from the center stone, with Goran and Sarah flanking me and the 5 Alphas arranged in their respective positions. We moved through the agenda with the precision I had planned. Territorial disputes addressed with the specific accord citations that made contestation legally impossible. The Redthorn succession crisis assigned a structured resolution framework. The cross-border trade violations flagged for individual pack review. I was meticulous. I was thorough, and I watched them adjust to me in real time. The subtle recalibrations of 5 alpha wolves who had arrived expecting something they could manage, and were discovering that was not what they had been given. Crest Vale of Velthorn was the sharpest mind in the room. I had suspected this from his correspondence. Watching him process the summit's proceedings confirmed it. He asked precise questions that tested the edges of my knowledge, and when my answers held, something in his manner shifted from cautious to genuinely interested. After the third such exchange, he stopped asking questions designed to probe my limits and started asking ones designed to understand my intentions. That was progress. Briar of Stonecrest was resistant throughout. Every ruling, every citation, every procedural step was accompanied by barely contained objection that his council representative quietly managed on his behalf. He was a wolf whose power had operated without check for long enough that the concept of accountability sat on him like an ill-fitting garment. I noted every objection. I answered each one. I did not raise my voice. By mid-afternoon, his council representative had stopped trying to contest me and was taking very careful notes. The other two alphas, Redthorn and Ashfin, were watchers. They asked little, absorbed everything, and exchanged glances with each other at intervals that suggested a private running commentary. I catalogued them as cautiously aligned, pending further evidence. Kale said almost nothing. He was present at every moment. I felt his attention as a constant pressure on the left side of my awareness, the specific quality of being watched by someone who is trying to understand something they cannot fully reach. But he made no objections, offered no contestation, submitted every Ironmore-related agenda item with the clean formality of a wolf who had prepared meticulously. He had read the accord. All of it. I could tell by how he anticipated the procedural moments, the way a person who has done thorough reading moves through a formal process with a kind of informed silence, rather than the reactive quiet of someone navigating blind. He had spent the 30 days since my summons studying that I didn't know what to do with that. I set it aside and kept working. The summit was winding toward its final agenda item, the formal matter of the sacred mating accord violations, when Mira of Stonecrest asked to speak. It was unexpected enough that I paused. She was not an alpha. She had no formal standing at the summit table, but she had been present throughout, seated behind her father with the stillness of someone exercising extreme self-control. And when she rose and formally requested the floor, every alpha at the table went carefully neutral-faced. I looked at her for a moment. Then I gestured my permission. She walked to a point between the assembled packs and the sovereignty delegation. She was poised, composed, every inch the daughter of a powerful alpha who had raised her to perform dignity under pressure. Then she said, I wish to formally withdraw my consent from the proposed mating arrangement with Alpha Kale Donfong. The silence that followed was different from the one after Kale's acknowledgement. That one had been historic. This one was complicated. Briar of Stonecrest rose to his feet. Mira, father. Her voice was quiet but absolute. I am speaking. He went still. She turned back to the center. The arrangement was built on an alliance that has not manifested as promised. The formal mating marking has not occurred in 3 years. The bond the moon goddess placed between Alpha Kale and his true fated mate has not been extinguished. It has only been suppressed, and that suppression has been visibly, measurably damaging to Alpha Kale's stability and governance capacity. Every eye in the assembly moved between her, Kale, and me. I did not enter this arrangement to be a political tool for an alliance that was never genuinely viable, Mira continued, with the clear, measured delivery of someone who had rehearsed these words long enough to remove the emotion from them. I entered it in good faith. That good faith has not been honored. She paused. I withdraw my consent. I request that the Stonecrest Ironmore Alliance framework be formally dissolved under terms that protect Stonecrest's independent territorial claims. She looked at me, directly at me. I believe the sovereign alpha has jurisdiction over this matter. I held her gaze. She knew who I was. Not just what I was, but who. How long had she known? Had she pieced it together from the name on the summons? From Kale's behavior over 3 years? From the way he sometimes looked north? I breathed once slowly. Mira of Stonecrest's withdrawal of consent is formally noted, I said. The sacred mating accord protects the right of any wolf to withdraw from a non-bonded arrangement without penalty at any point before the formal marking. I looked at Briar. Alpha Briar, your daughter's legal right in this matter is clear. I will address the territorial protection she's requesting under the dissolution framework. Briar sat down. He did not look happy, but he sat. Mira returned to her seat, and across the assembly, Kale had not moved. His face was nothing, a mask so complete it gave me no information. But his hands, resting on his knees, were absolutely still in the way that things are still when a great deal of force is being applied to prevent movement. The final agenda item, I said. And I looked at him. Ironmore's violations of the sacred mating accord. The specific language of Article 12, the article Cale had cited to justify his rejection, was, as Elder Brennan had quietly shown me in a library 3 years ago, more complicated than its surface reading. An alpha could indeed reject a fated bond on grounds of political necessity. What Article 12 did not permit, and what the 5 packs had either missed or chosen to overlook, was the indefinite suppression of that bond without consequence. The follow-on clause, Article 12, Section 4, which stated, in the ancient phrasing of the Accord's original scribes, the rejection of a fated bond carries with it the obligation of formal severance within 1 cycle of seasons, such that the rejected mate is freed from the bond's remnant pull and may seek her own path unimpeded. 1 cycle of seasons. 1 year. Cale had not performed the formal severance. He had rejected the bond, and then left it half alive, suppressed rather than severed, which, under the Accord, meant that for 2 of the 3 years since the rejection ceremony, Ironmore had been in violation of pack law. I had known this for 18 months. I had been waiting for the moment when presenting it would matter. Article 12, Section 4. I said from the center stone in the deep late afternoon light of the border stones. The violation is documented and the timeline is clear. I looked at Cale. Alpha Cale, do you contest the citation? His jaw was tight. No, he said. Do you contest the timeline? A beat. No, he said again. Then Ironmore is in violation, and the remedy must be decided. I held his gaze. Under the Accord, there are 2 remedies available for this specific violation. First, formal severance, completed within 30 days of this summit. Second, I paused. Second, the original bond is reinstated by mutual consent of both parties, and the violation is dissolved. The border stones were absolutely silent. Every wolf present understood what was being said. Every wolf present understood what was not being said. Cale was looking at me with the silver eyes that I had spent 3 years building walls against. And those walls were doing their job, steady, solid years of stone and will. And he said, quietly enough that technically only I should have heard it, but in the total silence of the assembly, everyone did. Seraphine, which do you want? My wolf pressed against my ribs like a tide against a wall. My hands were steady. They were always steady. That, I said carefully, formally, for the record, for the witnesses, for every wolf at the border stones, is not a decision that can be made today. The violated party, me, I am the violated party, requires adequate time to consider both options. The Accord allows 30 days. 30 days, Cale repeated. Yes. He held my gaze. Then I will wait, he said. And the way he said it, like someone who had been waiting for 3 years, and had only now understood what he was actually waiting for. Something cracked very slightly in the wall. I breathed. Summit adjourned. I said that he arrived on the 3rd day. Not the 30th. The 3rd. I was in the training clearing with Goran when the boundary scout's howl came from the northeastern perimeter. A single clean note, the signal for known presence, no threat, requesting guidance. Goran's head came up. I stilled. Then the scout's follow-up signal. 1 wolf. Alone. No retinue. No Ironmore colors. No formal delegation. Just 1 wolf, standing at the Ashwood boundary stones. Goran looked at me. I kept my face even. I'll go. Seraphine. Alone, I said. He held my gaze for a moment with the careful, measured expression of a wolf who had very strong opinions he was choosing not to voice. As you wish, he said. I walked the 3 miles to the boundary stones at a pace that was neither hurried nor slow. I used the time to breathe, to settle my wolf, who had been alert and restless since the summit 2 days ago, pacing in the way she did when something significant was approaching. I know, I told her. I know. Be still. She settled. Barely. He was standing at the largest boundary stone with his back to the Ashwood, facing south, looking out at the territory between here and Ironmore the way a man might look at a distance he has already crossed, and is calculating whether he made the right choice in crossing it. He had come without his ceremonial garments, without his alpha insignia, without any of the external markers of his rank. Dark riding clothes, worn leather, a travel cloak that had seen real use. He looked like a wolf who had ridden hard through the night and hadn't stopped to consider his appearance before arriving. He heard me coming. Of course he did, we were both wolves, and he turned. 3 years. Up close, without the formal distance of the summit, without the buffer of politics and procedural language between us. 3 years of change was more visible. His face was leaner. The silver eyes were the same but different, more shadows in them. The specific shadows that collect behind eyes that have been looking at something difficult for a long time without looking away. He looked like a man who had not slept well in a very long time. He looked like a man who had earned that. We stood on opposite sides of the boundary stone for a moment. "You're early," I said. "I know. The 30 days. I'm not here about the 30 days. He held my gaze. "I'm here because I have been standing at the wrong side of a line for 3 years, and I couldn't wait 30 more days to stop doing it." I breathed. "You're at the boundary of sovereignty territory," I said. "Are you requesting entry?" Something moved across his face. Not quite the pained expression I had seen at the summit, but adjacent to it. The awareness of protocol. The specific discomfort of an alpha who has never had to request entry to anything. Now doing exactly that. "Yes," he said. "I'm requesting entry." "For what purpose?" A pause. "To speak with the sovereign alpha," he said. "Personally." I studied him for a long moment. The boundary stone stood between us. Ancient carved rock, older than the 5-pack system, older than the Accord itself. A line in the physical world that mirrored a line in every other sense. I stepped aside. "Enter," I said. He crossed the boundary, and the ashwood, that vast, ancient, living forest, exhaled around him in the way it did when it recognized something. Not a welcome, exactly. More like the acknowledgement of a long-anticipated arrival. He felt it. His eyes moved upward briefly to the canopy. "The forest knows you're here," I said. "I feel it," he said quietly. "Come." I turned and walked north into the trees. He followed. I brought him to a small clearing half a mile from the main settlement. Far enough for privacy, close enough that I was still within range of the sovereignty's awareness. A fire pit sat cold at the clearing's center. I crouched and built a fire with practiced efficiency. Tinder, small wood, larger pieces, a strike of flint. And when the flames caught, I straightened and found him watching me with an expression I couldn't immediately categorize. "Sit," I said. He sat on the log across the fire from me. I sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The fire popped and settled. The ashwood murmured around us. Wine through pine, distant bird call, the deep underneath sound that I now recognized as the forest's own breath. "How did you know," he said finally, "that I would come?" "I didn't," I said. "I expected the 30 days. Then why did you allow it?" A sovereign territory. A rejected mate arriving unannounced at the boundary. I looked at him across the fire. "Because you came alone," I said. He was quiet for a moment, absorbing that. "You read it," he said. The gesture. "I read everything," I said. "I always have." Another silence. "I know," he said, quietly. Something in his voice that was not quite guilt and not quite grief, but was built from both. "I knew you were reading. In the library. I knew Brennan was letting you in." He paused. "I told myself it didn't matter. That what you were didn't matter, because what you were born into was the wrong category for what I needed." I said nothing. "I was wrong," he said. "Yes," I said. "You were." The directness of it seemed to land on him physically. He absorbed it without flinching, which I noted. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said. "I made the choice. I knew what the bond was. I felt it." He stopped. His jaw worked briefly. "I felt it from the moment in the courtyard. The basket of wood. I felt it and I chose to override it, and I told myself I was doing the right thing for my pack, for my bloodline, for the alliances we needed." He met my eyes. I was lying to myself. I was afraid. The word sat between us. Afraid. From Kale Donfong. The words landed with the weight of something that had cost a great deal to say. "Afraid of what?" I asked. He looked at the fire. "Of what it meant," he said, "that the moon goddess had chosen an Omega servant for me. Of what my pack would think. Of what my father would say." A pause. "Of what I would have to become to deserve you." My wolf went very still. I breathed very carefully. "And now," I said. He looked up from the fire. "Now I have spent 3 years becoming something worse than what I was afraid to be," he said. "I have spent 3 years watching my wolf deteriorate from the inside. Watching the alliance I chose over you fall apart. watching a woman I installed as consort have more dignity and self-knowledge than I had. Enough to withdraw publicly at a summit while I sat there and said nothing, because there was nothing I could say that was worth saying. His silver eyes held mine. And I have spent 3 years looking north when I thought no one was watching. The fire cracked between us. I came here, he said, because I need you to know that I understand what I did. Not the political version of it. Not the Article 12 version. The real version. I broke something sacred because I was afraid of what it would cost me. And the cost of breaking it was so much greater than anything I was afraid of that I don't have a framework for what comes next. He stopped. A long silence. Then, very quietly, "What did I do to you, Seraphine?" The question was not rhetorical. He was asking, really asking, and I looked at him across the fire. This man who had broken me at an altar and watched me rebuilt into something neither of us had been able to imagine. And I considered how to answer. Carefully, honestly. "You broke the worst version of my life," I said. He blinked. "I don't say that to absolve you," I said quickly. "What you did was cruel and cowardly, and it hurt in ways I am not willing to perform for you tonight. The pain was real, and it was enormous, and you earned every consequence that has followed it." I held his gaze. "But you also, by rejecting me, by breaking the bond, by forcing me out of a life that was too small for what I was, you sent me to the Ashwood. You sent me to Sarah and Goran. You sent me to the Ascension Rite." I paused. "You accidentally gave me my actual life." He was very quiet. "That doesn't make it right," I said. "No," he agreed, barely above a whisper. "And it doesn't mean I've forgiven you." He absorbed that. "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight." "Then what are you asking for?" He met my eyes. "The 30 days," he said. "I'm asking for the 30 days to mean something. I'm asking you to let me, not perform accountability, not execute a diplomatic strategy, but actually be here." He paused. "In the Ashwood. With you. If you'll allow it." My wolf pressed quietly against my ribs. I looked at the fire. "Goran will put you to work," I said. "A beat." "Good," he said. "The sovereignty has no rank hierarchy from outside. You are not an alpha inside these trees. You are a guest, subject to sovereignty protocols." "Understood. You'll sleep in the guest quarters. You'll follow the sovereignty's schedules. You'll not attempt to contact your pack council for the duration without my knowledge." "Agreed." I looked at him. He was watching me with the particular focus of a wolf who was listening to every word and underneath the words. "One more thing," I said. "Name it." "The choice at the end of 30 days is mine," I said. "Not the bonds. Not the accords. Not the moon goddesses. Plan, as I understand it. Mine. I will not be moved by obligation or politics or the suppression damage to your wolf or any other pressure. I will make the decision I decide to make and no other." He held my gaze for a long, steady moment. "Yes," he said. "Yes what?" "Yes, Seraphine," he said. "The choice is yours. It was always supposed to be yours. I took it away 3 years ago, and that was the worst of what I did." He paused. "I'm giving it back." The fire burned between us. The Ashwood breathed. My hands were steady. "Come on, then," I said and stood. "I'll show you where you're sleeping." He rose and followed me into the trees. Goran did, in fact, put him to work. I had expected him to. What I had not expected was how thoroughly, or with what specific, watchful intentionality. Kale was given the same starting protocol as every wolf who came to the sovereignty. No rank exceptions. No alpha accommodations. He hauled wood, maintained fire pits, assisted the pack healers with morning preparation, and worked the settlement's practical labor with everyone else before any training began. The first morning, I watched from a distance as Goran assigned him to wood-splitting detail alongside 2 younger sovereignty wolves, both former low-ranking pack members who had been here for less than a year. They eyed him with the careful wariness of wolves who knew who he was and weren't sure what to make of his presence. He took the axe without comment and split wood for 3 hours, without complaint, without the subtle dominance assertion that most alphas couldn't entirely suppress even when they were trying to, without any attempt to manage the situation. Just the work. The 2 younger wolves relaxed around him by mid-morning. By afternoon, one of them was showing him a more efficient grip technique. A boy of perhaps 19, teaching an alpha how to hold an axe. And Kale was listening and adjusting and saying thank you when it helped. Goran, passing by the wood yard, caught my eye from across the settlement. He He said nothing, but something in his expression acknowledged what we were both watching. The ash would change people. I had felt it do it to me. The slow, inexorable process of the forest, and the sovereignty and the deep training stripping away the constructions of rank and fear and survival habit, getting down to what was actually underneath. I watched it do it to Kale. Not quickly, not dramatically, quietly, day by day, the way water reshapes stone, not through violence, but through persistent presence. By the end of the first week, his wolf was less frayed at the edges. Still suppressed, the broken bond's absence was still a structural wound in him, a thing you could sense if you were attuned enough. But the white-knuckle quality of his control had eased slightly. The Ashwood's particular energy had something to do with it. The sacred grove's proximity. The way the forest itself seemed to breathe calm into anything within its borders that was willing to stop fighting long enough to breathe with it. He was willing. That surprised me. I had expected resistance. The natural defensiveness of an alpha stripped of his context, surrounded by wolves who didn't defer to his rank, operating under someone else's rules. Most alphas couldn't manage it without some form of pushback. He managed it, not effortlessly, not without visible adjustment, but he managed it with the grim, purposeful sincerity of a man who understood that this was not a test he could perform his way through and was choosing, for perhaps the first time, to simply be honest about what he was struggling with. He struggled with the submission of it. Of course he did. He was an alpha. The bone-deep dominance instinct was part of his fundamental nature. Not a flaw, not an excess, simply what he was. Being in an environment where that instinct had no outlet, no hierarchy to occupy, was genuinely physically uncomfortable for him in a way that had nothing to do with pride. I saw him, on the fourth night, sitting alone at the edge of the main fire pit after the settlement had gone quiet, in the partial shift state that alphas sometimes fell into when their control needed rest. Larger, more wolf, eyes silver-lit in the dark. He looked up when he heard me. I sat on the log across from him. "The wolf is restless," I said. "She's always restless now," he said. His voice in partial shift was deeper, with the particular resonance of a wolf letting more of himself show. "It's been 3 years. She doesn't understand the absence." He paused. "She keeps looking for what's missing." "The bond," I said. "Yes." He looked at his hands, larger in partial shift, claws present, the silver mark of the Donfang line more visible on the backs of them. 3 years of her not understanding why the thread is gone. She knows it was cut. She doesn't know why. He looked up. "Wolves don't understand politics." "No," I said. "They understand truth." He held my gaze. "What does your wolf understand about me now?" he asked. It was carefully phrased, not demanding, not manipulative. Genuinely asking. I considered the honest answer. "She understands that you are here," I said. "She understands that the absence of the bond is not the same as the absence of the person." I paused. "She is reserving judgment." He let out a slow breath. "And you," he said. "Not your wolf. You." I looked at the fire. "I am doing the same," I said. A long silence between us. Not uncomfortable. The specific quality of silence between two people who have a great deal to say and are choosing carefully to wait. "Tell me about the ascension rite," he said. I looked at him. "Why?" "Because I want to understand what happened to you," he said. "Not the political version. The real version." He met my eyes. "You asked me that earlier. I'm asking you." I breathed. And then slowly, carefully, choosing what to give and what to keep, I told him. Not everything. Not yet. But I told him about the Ashwood in winter. About Goran at the Boundary Stones. About Sarah Wildmore, and the first time I shifted fully in the Sovereignty's training clearing, and stood there in the moonlit grove, and felt my wolf unfold into her actual size for the first time. I told him about the Ascension Rite, the sacred grove, the 37 wolves howling, the moon goddess's attention, what it felt like to be fully, completely, terrifyingly seen. He listened without speaking. He listened the way someone listens when they know what they're being given is not freely available, and they are making sure not to waste a word of it. When I finished, the fire had burned low. "She was always that size," he said quietly. Not a question. "Yes." "I didn't," he stopped. His jaw worked briefly. "I looked at you, and I saw what the pack had made you. The category they'd put you in. I didn't look past it." He was quiet for a moment. "I should have looked past it." "You should have," I agreed. "Is it?" He stopped again. "Say it," I said. Is it possible, he said slowly, that part of what I was afraid of, underneath the politics and the bloodline concerns and all the rest of it, was that I could feel it, even then, that you were something I didn't have a category for, and it scared me more than I could admit. I looked at him across the dying fire. Yes, I said. I think that's probably true. That's not an excuse. No, I said. It's not, but it's honest. He nodded slowly. I rose. Get some sleep, I said. Goran has combat training scheduled at dawn, and he doesn't adjust the hour for anyone. Kale looked up at me, and there was something in his face that was not the grief or the conflict or the reckoning I had been tracking since the summit. Something quieter. Something that, in another life, at another fire, under different circumstances, I might have recognized immediately. Seraphine, he said. I stopped. Thank you, he said, for letting me in. I breathed once. Don't make me regret it, I said. And I went to bed. The days accumulated. He trained with Goran. And this I had not entirely anticipated. Kale was already a formidable fighter. 3 years as a full alpha. Years of training before that, the natural gifts of the Donfang bloodline. He was not a wolf who came to combat training needing to learn the fundamentals. What Goran taught him was something different. The sovereignty's fighting style was at its core about reading the opponent, the ground, the moment. About waiting rather than asserting. About finding the natural line of force and redirecting it rather than opposing it. An alpha's instinct was opposition. Dominance. Direct force. I watched Goran take that instinct apart over the course of 2 weeks with the patient efficiency of a master craftsman, and I watched Kale, who had to be experiencing this as a fundamental challenge to his deepest reflexes. Lean into it. On the 12th day, Goran hit him with a redirection technique that put him on the ground. He lay there for a moment. Then he got up, shook the earth off, and said, again. That night at dinner, the sovereignty ate communally around the central fire pit. Goran sat across from me and said, with the directness he always used, Your alpha is not what I expected. He's not my alpha, I said. Goran looked at me with the patience of a very old wolf who has developed strong opinions about dishonesty and is choosing not to voice them. He is not what I expected, he repeated simply. I looked across the fire pit to where Kale was seated between 2 of the sovereignty's senior wolves. A woman named Dale who had been an exiled beta for 12 years, and a former rogue named Brix who didn't speak much, but had a talent for reading people that had made him one of the settlement's most valuable members. They were talking. Kale was listening more than he was speaking. That was new for him. I could tell from small things. The way conversation had worked around him in Ironmore, the assumption of space and attention that alpha authority created. This was different. He was choosing it. He's trying, I said. He's not just trying, Goran said. He's changing. He paused. That is much harder. I said nothing. The question, Goran continued, in the quiet voice he used when he was saying something that mattered, is whether you are going to let yourself see it. I looked at him. I see everything, I said. You see the evidence, he said. I'm asking if you're going to let it mean something. The fire popped between us. That's what the 30 days are for, I said. 23 of them have passed, he said. I breathed. I know, I said that on the 25th day, he found me at the Sacred Grove boundary. I went there sometimes in the pre-dawn hours. Not inside, but at the edge, where the grove's particular quality of air could be felt without the full weight of its sacred attention. A thinking place. A breathing place. He appeared silently at the tree line behind me. I heard him, but I didn't turn. He came and stood beside me. Not too close, the careful, respectful distance he had been maintaining throughout his time in the Ashwood. And we both looked at the grove in the pre-dawn dark. I can feel it from here, he said quietly. The grove? Yes. Something happened in there. Not a question. Everything happened in there, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Seraphine. I need to say something. I turned to look at him. He was looking at the grove, his profile lit by the faint pre-dawn gray filtering through the canopy. His wolf was close to the surface. She often was in the early morning hours, I had noticed, when his conscious control was softer from sleep and she pressed upward toward the light. On the altar, he said. The night of the ceremony. I said nothing. Before I spoke, he paused, long enough that I could hear him choosing every word. When we were standing across the sacred flame and the elder had the binding cord, there was a moment. I remember it, I said. I felt it. He turned to look at me. The bond. Not the background pull I had been suppressing for months, the full weight of it. For one moment, with both of us on the altar and the fire between us, the bond opened fully. His silver eyes were very steady. I felt everything it was. So did I said. I know, he said. I could feel that you felt it. He breathed. And I looked at you, and I knew in that moment with absolute certainty that you were the most extraordinary wolf I had ever stood near. That what the bond was showing me was real and right, and exactly what the goddess intended. He paused. And then I looked away and said what I had prepared to say. The pre-dawn light was growing. Slowly, the ashwood's colors becoming visible. The deep greens and browns and silvers, the way the light touched the canopy and spread downward. I have spent 3 years, he said, trying to live with what I did in that moment. Not the political consequence. Not the accord violations. The moment itself. He looked at me. I looked at something extraordinary and chose the familiar instead. I chose fear over truth. I chose what I understood over what the goddess was giving. Me. His jaw worked briefly. That is the thing I am most ashamed of. I breathed. In. Down. Hold. Why are you telling me this now? I said. Because in 5 days you make your decision, he said. And I want you to make it with everything on the table. Not almost everything. Everything. He held my gaze. I want you to know exactly who rejected you and why. And I want you to know that the man who made that choice is not the same man who is standing here. Are you certain of that? I said. People change slowly. And then they are tested. And sometimes they find they haven't changed as much as they believed. I know, he said. I can't promise you the test. I can only show you what I've been doing with the time I've had. He paused. And I can tell you that my wolf has been quiet for the first time in 3 years. I looked at him. Since when? I said. He met my eyes. Since the 3rd night I was here, he said. When you sat across from me at the fire and told me about the right. He paused. She stopped pacing. She just stopped. And lay down. And I thought, he stopped. What? I said. I thought, there she is, he said softly. That's what was missing. Not the bond itself. Her. He looked at me with those shadow-filled silver eyes. You. Just you. Existing in the same space as me. Talking to me like I'm worth being honest with. His voice was very quiet. 3 years of my wolf pacing and howling and fraying at the edges. And she went quiet because you sat down and talked to me like I was worth your honesty. My wolf, inside me, pressed her nose against my ribs. Gently. I know, I told her. I know. The dawn broke fully above the ashwood canopy. Gold and silver light flooding down through the trees, touching the sacred grove ahead of us, and making it glow in the way that only this place, only at this hour, in this particular quality of early light. 5 days, I said. 5 days, he agreed. Go get some sleep before Goran's training, I said. He nodded. He turned to go. Kale, I said. He stopped. I had not called him by name. Not once in 25 days. It had been Alpha Kale in the formal contexts and nothing in the informal ones. A careful, deliberate maintenance of distance. He turned back. I heard you, I said. Everything you said. He was very still. That's all, I said. But we both understood. It wasn't nothing. It was very, very far from nothing. 5 days. I did not sleep well in them. Not because of doubt. Doubt was a familiar companion, and I had learned to work alongside it years ago. Not because of fear. Not because of the ghost of the bond or the ghost of the altar or any of the other ghosts that had been following me since the blood moon 3 years past. I didn't sleep because I was thinking, with the same thoroughness I had brought to every text in Elder Brennan's library, with the same care I had given to the Ascension rites preparation, examining from every angle, laying every piece of evidence on the floor of my mind and walking around it. What I had seen in 25 days. What I knew about the nature of bonds and the nature of men and the nature of change. What my wolf said when I asked her, in the honest dark of the pre-dawn hours, what she wanted. She didn't answer in language. She answered in the way wolves always do, with the direction of her attention, the quality of her stillness, the particular way she breathed. I knew what she wanted. The question I was really sitting with was not what do I want. It was what is true. And what was true was this. A bond reinstated was not the same as a bond that had never been broken. The original bond, the one the moon goddess had placed between us in a courtyard over a spilled basket of firewood, was gone. Severed by rejection, by Article 12, by 3 years of absence. What could exist between us now would be built. Not given. Not fated. Built. With every piece of damage visible and accounted for. With the altar between us as a permanent fact. Not forgiven, not erased, but integrated. Part of what we were now, the way scar tissue is part of a wolf's body. Evidence of something survived. I had not been destroyed by the altar. He had not been destroyed by the consequences. We had both become something more than what we were that night. The question was whether what we had become was capable of meeting each other honestly. I thought it might be. I wasn't certain, but I thought it might be. On the 30th day, I rose before dawn. I dressed carefully, not in ceremonial garments, not in the Sovereign Alpha's formal presentation. Simple clothes. A riding tunic of dark blue, leather leggings, a cloak against the early spring cold. Boots I could walk in. My hair down. Just myself. I went to the clearing where I had first built a fire for him, the night he arrived at the boundary stones. I rebuilt the fire. When it was burning steadily, I sat on the log and waited. He arrived 15 minutes later. He had dressed simply too. I noticed that immediately, and understood it as the deliberate choice it was. Not the Alpha's garments he had arrived in. Something plainer. Something that said this is me, without the position, without the rank, without the armor of what I represent. Just himself. He looked at the fire. He looked at me. He sat. For a moment we were quiet together, the way we had learned to be quiet together over 30 days. Not an absence of words, but a presence of something that didn't need them. 30th day, he said. Yes. Have you decided? I looked at the fire. I have something to say first, I said. Then say it, he said. I'm listening. I breathed. What you did on that altar was not just a personal wound, I said. I need you to understand the full weight of what I mean. You violated the most sacred bond our world recognizes. You did it publicly, deliberately, with prepared language, in front of 1,000 wolves. You weaponized my lack of status to justify it. And then you left me standing there in a white dress while the pack reorganized itself around your choice. He held my gaze. He did not look away. I know, he said. You carried that violation for 2 years without performing the accord-required severance, I continued. Which means you left the remnant of a broken bond active in me, and in yourself, for 2 years past the legal limit. That was not an accident or an oversight. That was a choice. Yes, he said. And your wolf's deterioration, I said. The fraying, the instability, the lost control. You used it, in the letter, as part of what you communicated to me. And I am aware that wolves, in your situation, feel genuine suffering. But I want to name it clearly. I have no obligation to your wolf's suffering. It was consequential. It was earned. It was, he said. No defense. No qualification. I looked at him. Say it back to me, I said. Not because I need to hear it. Because I need to know you can say it plainly without instinct softening it. He met my eyes. I violated the bond, he said, evenly plainly. I did it deliberately, from fear dressed as strategy. I compounded the violation for 2 years. My wolf's suffering was consequential, not unjust. I have no claim on your forgiveness or your choice. Silence. The fire burned between us. Now, I said, and I looked at him, fully, with everything I had trained myself to see, reading the whole landscape of him the way Sarah had taught me to read the world. Not just the surface, not just the performance, not just what was offered, but the full truth underneath. What I saw, a man who had spent 30 days in a forest that stripped pretense, and had not once tried to put it back on. A wolf whose instincts I had watched recalibrate towards something more honest than what they had been when he arrived. Grief that was real. Change that was real. Not complete. Not guaranteed. Not without the risk that the true test was still ahead and he might fail it. But real. He's not just trying, Goran had said. He's changing. And the moon goddess makes no mistakes. She had chosen him for me before either of us had made a single choice. She had chosen me for him with a lunar brand and a sovereign's power that dwarfed anything either of our bloodlines could have produced alone. And she had let the rejection happen. She had let the altar happen. She had let the breaking and the exile and the 3 years of becoming happen, because she had known what it would make us. I breathed. In. Down. Hold. Out. The formal severance, I said, is no longer my preferred remedy. He went very still. Which means the second option applies, I said. Reinstatement of the bond by mutual consent. I held his gaze. But this is not the original bond. I want that understood. The original bond was given. What we build now is chosen. Every day, actively chosen. By both of us. Yes, he said. If you fail me, I said, you don't get Article 12. You don't get another ceremony. You don't get a clean exit from the consequences. You understand what I am now and what I represent. A sovereign alpha scorned twice is something the Accord doesn't have precedent for, and I am comfortable being the precedent. Something that was almost a smile moved through his eyes, shadowed and complicated, but real. I understand, he said. Then come here, I said. He rose from his log and crossed the fire. Not around it, over it, a step that sent sparks scattering into the dark, and stopped before me. Close. Closer than the careful distance of 30 days. Close enough that his scent reached me fully. Pine and cold iron, and the warm underneath that my wolf had known from the first moment in the courtyard. And she pressed her nose against my ribs with a pressure that was not quite joy and not quite relief, but was made from both. He raised his hand. Slowly. Giving me every moment to step back. I didn't step back. His fingers touched my jaw. The lightest possible contact, barely there. And I felt the world hold its breath. I see you, he said. Not the statement of a man who had just arrived at this understanding. The statement of a man who had been learning to say it correctly for 30 days and was finally getting it right. I see you, he said. Not the servant I was afraid of. Not the sovereign alpha I'm politically bound to. You, Seraphine. The girl who read every book in the dark and stood at an altar with steady hands and walked north into a forest that rebuilt her. His silver eyes were very close. I see you. I should have seen you from the start. My hands were steady. They were always steady. But my voice, when I spoke, was not entirely even. You see me now, I said. That's what matters. And the bond. Not the old one. Not the faded thread the goddess had placed between us in a courtyard years ago. But something new, something chosen. Something built from wreckage and honesty and 30 days in an ancient forest, began quietly and deliberately to form. Not a snap. Not a flood. A thread. Thin and bright and chosen. His forehead came to rest against mine. Neither of us moved. The ashwood breathed around us, that great, ancient, patient exhalation. And the fire burned low between the logs where we had been sitting, and above the canopy, somewhere behind the morning clouds, the moon was still there. She is always still there. The moon goddess watching. Not making mistakes. Never making mistakes. They say a great many things about the sovereign alpha of the ashwood. They say she rose from nothing. A servant girl with no rank and no bloodline, and no one who believed in her except an old elder who left library doors unlocked, and a book on a table one night before everything broke. They say she walked north alone and came back as something the 5 packs had no category for. They say she conducted a summit at the ancient border stones and made 5 alphas kneel without raising her voice once. They say the ashwood itself glows on certain nights now. A silver light rising from the sacred grove, visible from the edge of the northern territories, the kind of light that makes wolves stop what they're doing and lift their faces toward it without entirely knowing why. They are right about all of it. What they don't say, what doesn't make its way into the formal histories or the pack records or the letters between alphas processing the new shape of their political world, is what happened after. Kale Donfong returned to Ironmoor. Not alone. He returned with the sovereign alpha beside him, not as his Luna, not as a consort, not as a political arrangement, but as herself in her full authority, the lunar brand visible on the ceremonial garments she wore as they rode south through the 5-pack territories. The pack came out to meet them. 1,000 wolves. The same 1,000 who had stood on that hillside 3 years ago, in the torchlight, watching a servant girl in a white dress walk down the altar steps in silence. The same wolves. Not the same moment. Seraphine rode through them without hurry, with the unhurried certainty of a wolf who knows that she has arrived precisely when she was meant to. She did not look for the faces that had turned away. She did not look for the ones that had whispered. She looked forward, at the great hall where she had once kept the fire lit and stayed out of the way. At the altar on the hill above the settlement, visible against the sky. She had thought once that she would return here with something to prove. She had nothing to prove. She had something to offer. The sovereign Accord's protection, the Ashwood sovereignty's oversight, the ancient stability of a power structure the five packs needed, whether they understood it yet or not. That was why she had come. What she found, when she had been in Ironmore 2 days, was that Elder Brennan was still alive. He was very old now, older than the word suggested. He had been ancient when she was a child, and 3 years had pressed further weight into the lines of his face and the careful slowness of his movement. She found him in the library,